This is Adam Stofsky from Briefly. I'm here with Tyler Finn from SpotDraft and Ken Priore from DocuSign. Hey guys, how's it going?
Going well.
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
So it's apparently 2024. It's now January 2024. So I've been told AI is going to kind of be a big deal this year. And companies are facing a lot of challenges in how to adopt AI and deal with the many, I'm just going to say, kind of changes it brings to their business. And so SpotDraft has been working with some of its partners on developing a set of tools to help companies adjust and adapt. So Tyler, why don't you take it away and tell us what we're working on here?
Yeah. We worked with Ken and a number of other GCs, compliance professionals, legal leaders to develop an AI policy playbook, a set of best practices around how you might go about developing an AI use policy to regulate use of AI tools and products within your business, and then how to roll it out. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about with Ken here today.
Okay, great. All right, well, take it away, Tyler. What are we going to cover with Ken?
Ken, why don't we start by talking about policy development, rollout, and if you're trying to do it effectively, the sort of culture and strategy your org needs to have around AI use. How do you understand what that culture and strategy is as you're just getting started?
Yeah, I think it's. I like the idea of sort of leading that question with culture, right? Because certainly right now across the board, every business leader from the CEO down to sort of folks just starting out their career are holding AI as like, this is the thing and we have to make this thing happen. And I think the first mindset to apply is to understand that for the constituents that you're working with, whether that is the leaders or whether that is more at sort of the tactical level of rolling out sort of the functional leaders, is what is their expectation? How do they look at AI? What is the set of beliefs that they have coming to this technology? Because just the phrase AI just has so many meanings to so many folks. There's going to be leaders who are going to lean completely in and say, we have to make this happen. And there's going to be other folks who sort of bring a set of skepticism. And I think both of those mindsets are valid. And so when you're thinking about the policy and how to craft the policy, I think that's the first level of understanding, is to understand who is your audience, what are their expectations, and then that will help you underpin developing a policy that makes sense for them.
Once you understand the strategy that you think you want to help the business drive around AI use through this sort of policy development, what are the first steps or what are some of the levers that are available to you?
You know, it's I think a good place or potential place to start is first kind of what do you already have in your bank of policies or your rules of the road inside the organization? Because as much as AI is a new technology, policies aren't. And I think one of the quickest routes to market, if you think about policy being something you can have a route to market, is to say, what do we have today that's applicable here? And I think inside organizations, some of that will come in the compliance teams, others perhaps in the privacy teams, and for other organizations, maybe in the data governance teams. And you can take a look at the sets of policies that you already have and say, all right, what do we have that we need to dust off and refresh here? What do we have that actually covers for what we're trying to accomplish? And that goes into the first set of concerns about what is your organization trying to accomplish? Are you going to lean completely in because it's a mandate from the CEO or the product leaders? Or is it approaching it with perhaps a dose of skepticism to say, we're curious, but we want to have this out in a more metered rollout? And some of that can be very dependent on the type of organization. If you're an organization that has a lot of sensitive data or health data or kind of areas where you want to move with a more metered approach, you're more likely probably to first lean into the policies that you have and say, well, these are still applicable. But as we start to explore in AI, let's update these. Versus other organizations that might have a different risk profile or have a different mandate, where they're going to say, like, no, we need to have a new policy that's based on something completely different. What we've done before won't be relevant here. And so I think starting with where you're at and layering it into kind of what the goals are for those leaders is sort of a great approach.
One idea that we've talked about offline that I think is really interesting and something that I haven't heard of in a lot of circumstances is the idea of a sandbox, a sort of sandbox for the product team to potentially experiment, or teams to experiment around leveraging AI tools. Tell us a little bit about some examples of where a sandbox has worked well for you in the past.
Yeah, I think it's, certainly the sandbox environment is a mechanism that's been used in technology deployments, for a while. Where I think they become really interesting around AI and maybe the most applicable is when organizations are coming from a space of we don't know what we want to do yet, but we want to enable our teams to be able to play, kind of really pulling that sandbox metaphor out there. And this allows teams, and so from a policy standpoint, I think the first thing you have to identify, which is what teams do you want to have access to this environment? The next is to understand how is this environment going to be structured? So are you going to be using certain types of tooling and third-party providers where they're going to be the public domain versions of the tools, whether it's a ChatGPT or Bard or some of these other foundational models that are available? Or are you going to have an enterprise level tooling in that sandbox? And the reason why that's important is that goes into the data sharing practices of those particular tools. I'd say in the best case, you have a sandbox where there is no data being shared out. The data that's being put into that sandbox does not include what your organization has identified as sets of data that you just don't want to have go into that environment. Confidential information, customer information, PII, those are some of the categories come to mind. But the idea here is you create an environment where you can have technology professionals and sometimes even business professionals go in and just play and have an understanding of what can this tooling do for me? Because, and speaking kind of from my personal experiences, especially with foundational models, they can take your questions or they can take your experiments in unexpected ways. And it's sometimes that good and bad, right? Some of the hallucinations I've experienced. I remember one of them, I asked them about myself and they said, well, you're a baker from Italy. And I said, well, that's not quite right, but okay, I appreciate the vote of confidence in my next career. But that ability for teams to be able to explore and not have a worry about, am I doing this correctly? What is its output going to be? Can start to create the foundation for actual use cases where those teams can approach the business and say, we've explored, we've played, we now have an idea of what this tool can do for us. We want to move from this sandbox environment into a more of a beginning of more of a production-facing tooling.
Ken, that's interesting. I have a follow-up question from the perspective of somebody who is not an in-house lawyer. I guess, can you explain a bit more about why this issue of culture is so important? What are we really worried about? I mean, I've worked in companies that have had in-house lawyers and they were policies and you follow them if you want to keep working at that company. Is this different? Why is culture so important when, considering an AI use policy within the company?
It's a really interesting follow-up question. I'd say first maybe way to cast this is, culture as a proxy for risk tolerance. And maybe that's another way to phrase it, which is how much is your organization willing to take risk? But then another nuance under that, which is how much is the organization to say we're going to enable this AI thing at any cost? And so that which is another way of saying like we're going to take the risk. But where I think it becomes really important is it's I think about a policy is somewhat a set of definitions of what to do and what not to do. But what can be inherent with these foundational models or some of this AI tooling is the unexpected. And so you start to have this sense of, I can't, through policy, I can't define every situation that's going to happen, but I hopefully can start to give you a sense of what makes I don't want to say good behavior or bad behavior, or what makes behavior that we're willing to operate with or aligns to our risk profile, and what is behavior that is so far into the unknown that we don't want to take that risk. And it starts to create a set of capabilities in the policy where an individual can make that determination. And then in some cases, it's going to be a set of bright lines that folks won't cross. And an easy example is don't upload confidential information or don't use personal identifying information. If that's what we were talking about, then the policy wouldn't be very different than what we have today in a lot of data governance policies. But because the very nature of foundation, generative AI and foundational models can take you in the unexpected, that probably is not going to be the way to get to a full set of what you're trying to do with good policy.
Got it. Okay, this makes more sense to me. In many ways, as you're talking, I'm trying to think about what are some other analogous technologies that might involve this level of kind of uncertainty. I'm not sure I can think of one, right? So it's the very generative nature of this technology that makes it so you can imagine 40 years ago when companies first adopted, credit cards, right? That's a huge deal. I wasn't alive then probably, but you could imagine people really freaking out about risk. You're going to carry this thing with you. What if someone steals the number, or maybe cell phones, whatever, or email, whatever the thing was. But there's nothing quite like this in terms of its ability to kind of take us in unexpected directions. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I'd even sort of take it maybe another level, which is part of the power we're trying to harness is the unexpected, right? Because and it's that creative portion to it. And I think about as I've drafted versions of policies through the years, that's what's unique is trying to say, how do I create a policy that creates proper risk boundaries, but also allows the unexpected to happen? And you have to sort of, by its very nature, I'd say, be comfortable that there's going to be an incredible amount of gray zone there or unknowable. And then that becomes the sort of the power of the policy. And you can have catch-alls, which are, if you're unsure, contact your friendly legal professional. And those are good things to have in your policy. But at least in the sandboxed environment, if we go back to sort of that first part of the question, you actually just want folks to go. And you just want them to be able to go out and explore and find the edges of what that creativity is, because then that's when the aha can happen in terms of product development.
Right. Super interesting. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.